Jesus Trilogy, The Four Messiahs, Chapter 4. The next day, not having heard from Mary, Joseph got out the ox cart and loaded it with a large chest he had so carefully and painstakingly built for Barnabas' rich customer. "Daddy, Daddy, there's a man here," Rachel yelled. "Who is it, honey?" "A man," she said. "Oh, what's his name?" "I don't know," she said as she chewed on some nuts. "Oh, then let's see who it is." "Hi, Joseph, how goes it?" "Hey, that's a nice piece of work. Where'd you buy it from?" The man knew full well Joseph had made it. "Made it myself, Hazen. See the label," Joseph said, a bit of sarcasm in his voice. "Could have fooled me. I ain't seen nothing like this since I was in Rome 4 years ago." "You sure you built this?" Hazen knew he could only push Joseph so far, so he backed off. Okay, I believe you. Anyway, I didn't come all the way up to this godforsaken place to discuss that. Hazen's shop was on the east end of Nazareth, the better part of town. He had a house in the exclusive East Hills district and had come down on horseback. He rode a beautiful Arabian white with a shiny new Roman saddle. No doubt he got it with a kickback from a job for some Roman general. Hazen was a little man, 5'4", with shoes, and an accomplished talker. He could talk his way into or out of anything. Hazen wasn't much of a carpenter, Joseph knew, but he had schemed and connived his business into a thriving concern. It was said that he was the richest man in Nazareth. Two men on horseback were waiting by the road. "Here you're thinking of relocating down south." Joseph had no idea where Hazen had obtained that information, but did not press the point. "I'm doing okay here," he said. "I heard that old Barney is taking you on." "Where'd you hear that?" Joseph was angrier now. He hadn't told a soul. He struggled to maintain his cool. "Oh, I got my sources," Hazen said airily. "I heard Barney was going to give you a good salary and everything." "I like to keep my business private," Joseph said. "Suit yourself. I just thought I'd ask if you wanted to work for me. I'll double whatever old Barn wants to give you, and you'll get a month's vacation." "Got a contract with me. You fill in the salary figure," Hazen said. "Hey, Seth, bring that contract up here," Hazen yelled out to his lawyer sitting in the street. But Joseph said, "Don't bother, Hazen. I just couldn't work for you." "It's a great deal," Hazen said. "You'll never get a better deal from me or anyone else. Mind telling me why you won't work for me? Is it 'cause of that little babysitter you've been running around with? Can't leave the young ones alone, eh? I hear she's a real fox." Hazen knew he'd pushed one too many buttons and began walking backward toward the road. "You better leave," Joseph said in his deep, booming voice. I'm gone," Hazen said as he hastily retreated down the walk. "Think it over," he yelled as he rode off, his lawyer and bodyguard in tow. Joseph picked up Rachel, and her smile immediately melted away his anger. "Who was that little man, Daddy?" Rachel asked. "Just a friend." Mary wondered what was going on. Her period was late. That hadn't happened for several years. She had developed female characteristics earlier than any of her friends, and her menarche came when she was 10 and a half. She remembered it like yesterday. She spotted a little blood in her panties after going to the bathroom. It scared her to death. Was she going to die? Did she have cancer, or was it something she ate? She didn't tell her mother, though when she came out of the bathroom, a primitive latrine behind the house, her mother noticed the paleness in her face. Mary checked herself a few more times. No more blood, but she noticed a little tummy pain after supper. The chicken was a little greasy, she guessed, but in the middle of the night she woke with a start, thinking, "I have wet the bed." She lit a couple candles and then let out a scream. Her mother rushed in and discovered the problem. She tried to calm her daughter, but it took quite a while. Explanations of this nature were not the custom of the day until after the fact. That first period lasted a whole 5 days, but Mary recovered. She had been irregular for about 3 years with lots of cramping each time, but suddenly that all improved. She became regular about age 14 when more of her femaleness began to show. Breast and hip development seemed to correlate with her regularity. A doctor had checked her when she was 12 because of the irregularity. It was the most painful, awful experience of her life. How could anyone ever have a baby, she thought during the exam. But she lived through it. The doctor said she was okay, things would straighten out, and they did. But now, again, she had missed a couple of days. Her last period had started March 18. It was now April 20. But she was always like clockwork, at least for the last few years. What could be wrong? She felt fine, no pain or cramps. Could she be sick? There were certainly no boys in the picture. True, she had fantasies as any normal girl did. Mostly they were of Josiah. Where was he and how was he doing? Probably a football star by now. She'd make it a point to ask her friends. There was no time for boys. Thomas, the short kid, had a crush on her, but he was only 15 and a little plump. No time for that now. She shook her head and got herself out of the daydream and back to reality. Get hold of yourself, she thought. He will come. If not, I'll tell Mom and she can ask the doctor. But she so wished it would come. She didn't want another vaginal exam. She now saw that her daydreaming had made her late. She quickly grabbed her overnight bag and raced out the door, yelling, "Bye, Mom." She could faintly hear her mother call after her, "Let me know if you have trouble." Joseph said goodbye to the kids, waved to Mary, and urged the oxen down the road leading to town. He looked back at Mary. That girl is truly a gift from God, he thought. The road was filled with ruts. It seemed rougher than usual. He wanted to get over to Barnabas' place in South Nazareth before dark. "Man, these roads are worse than ever," he observed aloud. "Can't they repair this road just a little bit?" Then he caught himself. Taxes are already too high. He'd get along. He had heard of Rome and its beautifully constructed great roads of rock and mortar. The Appian Way, Hazen called it at one of the union meetings. Some day, maybe he, Joseph, would have a ride on that road. How wonderful that would be. He began to sing an old hymn that he knew. He had a beautiful voice, deep and strong. He always could sing as far back as he could remember. Nothing relaxed him more than singing, nothing except for making love to his wife. How he missed her. He began to sing louder. "Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death." He sang all the way down the main road. Just as his wagon turned onto the stone portion of the road, he heard a crash, then a squeal, and he nearly fell off the cart. He looked down and saw the wheel lying by the cart, axle on the ground, and his precious cargo slowly sliding back downward. He jumped off the cart quickly, grabbed the cabinet, and nailed it firm just before it fell to the hard stone road. With his great strength, he easily slid the cabinet back on the center of the cart and secured it with a rope. The cart was another matter. It weighed several 100 pounds. He could muster enough strength to lift up one side, but he couldn't get the wheel on by himself. He looked around for some stones to try and jack it up. Only he had the foresight to bring along some boards. The cart was old, the road rough. He should have expected this. No use crying over spilt milk. "Howdy, stranger," a voice said from behind him. "Howdy," Joseph said, turning to see who it was. "Looks like you've had some trouble there. Nasty roads in this town." It was Shimei, Hazen's bodyguard. He wasn't taller than Joseph, but a lot bigger, near 300 pounds, Joseph guessed. Shimei had done some wrestling. In fact, these two athletic types had wrestled each other a few times in high school. Joseph remembered not having lost to this big guy. Their strength was fairly equal, but Joseph's quickness gave him the edge. "I lost the wheel on this old cart. You wouldn't have a jack nearby." "Can't say as I do," Shimei replied. "Well, thanks anyway. I'll have to go back home and get one." They both knew they were 3 miles from Joseph's place. "I was just headed down to the Sunrise Tavern for a couple drinks. Maybe I can help." "I'd be mighty grateful," Joseph said, relief in his voice. "Let me lift her up here and see if you can snap that wheel back on," Shimei proposed. He moved his bulk over to the right of the wagon and gave a mighty heave, grabbing the frame with both hands. Slowly the wagon rose, and Joseph grabbed the loose wheel. As the axle of the wagon got high enough off the ground, he slipped it on and secured the metal pins. "There, that should do it," Shimei wheezed. He then winced as he straightened up. What do I owe you? Joseph asked. Forget it. Maybe you can return the favor sometime, Shimei said. Grateful as he was, Joseph knew what Shimei meant. Hazen's offer was still on the table. Why don't you come down the old Sunrise for a couple of tall, cool ones? We could talk over old times. You and me had some good battles, Shimei offered. I really can't. I've got to get this cart down to the customer yet tonight. Thanks so much for your kindness, Joseph said, not wanting to offend the one who had saved him an awful lot of trouble. Maybe next time. See you around, Joe. Shimei sauntered off, rubbing his back. Thanks again, Joseph said, waving. The rest of the trip was less eventful. He had to cross the checkpoint of the Roman guard at the city gate. They frisked him for weapons, took a toll of 2 pence, and let him enter the Nazareth town proper. The sentry commented how nice the cabinet would look in his own home, but didn't make further trouble. Joseph continued on down Main Avenue until he reached 2nd Street, then he turned west 1 block so as to avoid the Sunrise Tavern. He didn't want to encounter Shimei again. After he was all tanked up, he might want to avenge those high school wrestling losses. Joseph turned back south and followed 2nd Street down a few blocks. Then he jogged back over to Main and continued south until he saw the front of Barnabas Building. The large sign read, Barnabas Construction Limited. He parked in front of the building and walked 1/2 block west to Barnabas House, a beautiful stucco with fine landscaping. The mailbox read Barnabas 210, and the doormat said Welcome. Just as Joseph went to knock on the door, it opened. Barnabas welcomed him in. Come on in, Joseph. We're getting worried about you. You must meet my wife, Abigail. Ab, this is Joseph, finest craftsman in these parts. Sorry, Barnabas, I had a little cart trouble, Joseph said ruefully. Never mind. Sit down and have a spot of tea.